If ready for some chess magic, like and subscribe to stay connected. This is a book move. The opening is called Queen's Pawn Game.
Control of the center with the knight preparing to develop other pieces and potentially creating a pawn chain on the d-file.
Developing the knight to a strong central square, preparing to control the center and potentially attacking black's pawn on d5.
Pawn to d5 is the best move.
Control of the center, preparing to develop other pieces and creating space for the bishop to potentially pin on black's knight.
Pawn to e6.
Pawn to e3 is excellent. Knight to c3 is best. This develops a knight.
Pawn to a6.
Pawn to b3 is best.
Pawn to c5 is the best move.
Bishop to b2.
Bishop to b7 is excellent. This defends a rook on e8. This develops a bishop. This fianchettos the bishop by putting it on a powerful diagonal. Knight from file b to d7 is best. This develops a knight.
Preparing to develop the queenside pieces and control the center with c4, while also eyeing the pawn to d5 pawn and preparing to potentially push pawn to d4 further, all while maintaining a solid pawn structure.
Pawn captures on c4 is the best move.
Kingside castle is best.
Bishop to d6.
Knight from file b to d2 is best. This develops a knight.
Kingside castle.
Knight to e5 is excellent. This offers a trade. Queen to c2 is best. This defends a bishop and bishop on b4 and d3.
I played pawn to c5 to challenge black's central pawn structure and create space for my pieces to develop. The move also pins black's knight on d7, making it harder for them to maneuver.
Pawn to f4.
Pawn captures on d4 is best. This is a trade.
I played pawn captures on d4 to challenge black's pawn structure and create space for my pieces to develop. The move also pins black's knight on d7, putting pressure on the pawn to d5 pawn and preparing for potential pawn breaks on the queenside.
Attacking the knight on f6, preparing to develop the rest of the pieces and gaining space on the kingside. The pin on the knight on pawn to f6 also puts pressure on black's position.
Attacking the knight on f6, gaining control of the center and preparing to develop other pieces. The pin on the knight also puts pressure on black's pawn structure.
I played pawn captures on e4 to challenge black's pawn structure and create space for my pieces to develop. The exchange also pins black's knight on f8, putting pressure on their position.
Bishop to e2.
Attacking black's pawn on pawn to e4 and gaining space on the king side. Pawn to f5 is a typical move in the symmetrical variation of the queen's pawn game. It also prepares to develop the kingside pieces and puts pressure on black's position.
King to h1 is good. Queen to e1 is best.
Knight captures on e5 is the best move.
Rook to c1 is good. This develops a rook. By placing the rook on an open file, it controls important columns. Queen to e1 is best.
Developing the knight to a strong central square, preparing to control the pawn to d5 square and potentially attacking the white pawn on f8.
Queen to e1 is the best move.
Preparing to develop the queenside, queen to e7 puts pressure on black's position, eyeing the pawn to d5 pawn and preparing to potentially push d4 d5, while also supporting the pawn on pawn to e6 and preparing to develop the rest of the queenside pieces.
Queen to g3 is a strong move, attacking black's knight on pawn to f6 and preparing to develop the rest of the queenside pieces. It also puts pressure on black's pawn on d5, making it harder for them to play d4.
Bishop to a3.
I play bishop captures on a3 to gain a strong initiative and attack black's position, using the pin on black's knight to force a weakness in their pawn structure. This move also prepares to develop the rest of the pieces and put pressure on black's position.
Queen captures on a3.
Rook to c2.
Preparing to develop the queenside pawns and support the central pawn on d5. Rook from file f to d8 also pins the knight on b7, creating a potential weakness on the queenside.
Rook to d2 is excellent. This defends a pawn on d4. By placing the rook on an open file, it controls important columns. Rook to d1 is best. This defends a pawn on d4. By placing the rook on an open file, it controls important columns.
I played queen to b4 to put pressure on black's position and prepared to develop the rest of my pieces. The pin on black's knight on pawn to f6 creates a threat to their pawn on f8, forcing them to respond and potentially weakening their pawn structure.
Preparing to develop the queenside pieces, rook from file f to d1 supports the central pawn on pawn to d4 and prepares to potentially play d3, putting pressure on black's position and controlling the pawn to d5 square.
Queen to e7 is good. This defends a pawn and bishop on e6 and b7. Pawn to b5 is best. This offers a trade.
Queen to e3.
I played pawn to b5 to challenge black pawn structure and create space for my pieces to develop. The pin on black's knight on pawn to f6 and the potential fork on the f-file make it a strong move, aiming to gain a strategic advantage.
Pawn to a4 is the best move.
Queen to a3 is the best move.
Pawn to g4 is excellent. This offers a trade. King to h2 is best.
Pawn captures on c4.
I played pawn captures on c4 to challenge black's control of the queenside and create space for my pieces to develop. The pawn to c4 push also pins black's knight on c6, making it difficult for them to defend against my central pawns.
I played knight to d7 to attack black's pawn on d5, creating a potential pin on black's knight on d7. This move also prepares to develop the rest of my pieces and control the center of the board.
I played knight captures on d7 to gain a strong initiative and attack black's position, using the knight to pin black's knight on d7, putting pressure on the king side and preparing to develop other pieces.
Rook captures on d7 is the best move.
Pawn captures on f5 is the best move.
Pawn captures on f5.
I played pawn to d5 to challenge black's central pawn structure and create space for my pieces to develop. This move also pins black's knight on d7, making it harder for them to maneuver.
Queen to c5.
Queen captures on c5 is best. This is a trade.
Attacking the black pawn on pawn to c5 with the rook creating a potential weakness and gaining a strategic advantage. This move also opens up the d-file for potential future use, putting pressure on the black position.
Rook to b2 is the best move.
Rook to b7 is the best move.
I play king to g2 to prepare for the potential pawn storm on the king side, supporting the f-pawn and preparing to potentially push d4, d5, while also eyeing the black king's position and potential weaknesses on the king side.
Pawn to e3 is an accuracy. The opponent can play arbitro. Rook to b7 is best. By placing the rook on an open file, it controls important columns.
Rook to d4 is good. This defends a pawn on f4. Rook to b2 is best. By placing the rook on an open file, it controls important columns.
Rook to f5 is a strong move, attacking black's pawn on pawn to e4 and preparing to develop the rest of the queenside pieces. It also puts pressure on black's position, forcing them to respond to the attack.
King to f3 is good. This defends a bishop on e2. This attacks the pawn. Rook to a1 is best. This defends a pawn on e2.
Rook catches on a2.
Pawn to c5.
Rook catches on d5.
Attacking the black pawn on d5, creating a passed pawn on the queen side and gaining a strong initiative. The rook captures on d5 also pins the black knight on d7, putting pressure on the black position.
King to e6 is the best move.
King captures on e3 is best. This attacks the rook. This move gains a tempo. This captures a free pawn.
Rook captures on d5 is best. This defends a pawn on f5. This attacks the pawn. This move gains a tempo. This captures a free rook.
I played bishop to c4 to attack black's position and prepare for a potential pawn storm on the queen side. The bishop pin on black's knight to pawn to c6 also puts pressure on their pawn structure, making it difficult for them to defend against my central pawns.
King to e6 is the best move.
Rook to b1 is a strong move, attacking black's pawn on pawn to e4 and preparing to potentially push d5, putting pressure on black's position and forcing them to respond to the potential pawn storm.
King to d7.
Bishop captures on d5 is the best move.
I played bishop captures on d5 to take advantage of the weakened pawn structure on d5, creating a strong initiative and putting pressure on black's position. This move also pins black's knight on d7, limiting its mobility and creating a potential weakness.
Rook to b6 is best. This attacks the pawn. This move gains a tempo.
Pawn to f5.
Attacking black's king with a rook pin, forcing Darnell to move his king and creating a potential weakness on the d-file. The game is over. White wins.